Welcome to turn 1 of scenario 1 of Tinian the Forgotten Battle by Compass Games and Ross Mortel. So we have this scenario is all about the landings, about the first day of the battle, and I suppose some people might say I seem to be a little bit obsessed about amphibious landings, having done Gallipoli and Peleliu in Fields of Fire. Just there's absolutely no rhyme or reason why that's happened that way, but yeah, they are reasonably fascinating situations on the battlefield. But anyway, so we have the Americans landing on these two beaches here, and we have the naval zones to approach here, and we'll be using what's known as amphibious movement. It's a particular chit rather than an activation chit for the American side to move the units down. I think I said in the intro that this isn't actually a space where you store units. You skip through and get fired upon here. Nothing much to say about the Americans. We have infantry companies here and the odd mortar unit, and we've got a couple of infantry leaders as well. And off here we've got our potential air support and task force markers to use as and when. Yeah, that's kind of the Americans really. Just looking a little bit in detail at the Japanese. So everything's covered by fortification, so most things are under foxholes, and then there is the odd pillbox, particularly this one here, which is interesting. It's actually an artillery unit right in the front line, but of course it's probably naval artillery. Being the red, it's part of the Imperial Navy, not the Imperial Army, so that's just where it is to cover the coast. We have other artillery units, and to be honest, they're actually quite scary size. For example, if we zoom in around these, the original one I showed you, that's a 3-factor, which is a fairly small in comparison to some of these guys. That's a 5-factor with 41 range, and there's these guys up here, which are a 4-factor and a 5-factor again, and there is another one way up here which is a 4-factor. So oh, did you? I think I jogged the camera there. A 4-factor. Yeah, so there's quite considerable artillery, but however there's a special rule in the game for the entire game that they can only fire on activation and never by direct command. So they don't get the double go, and they don't get that extra go when direct commands are picked. The direct command check comes out. Beyond that, probably the next significant unit here would be the anti-tank guns, and these surround the airfield. The airfield here, that's these 3 spots. These are actually in pillboxes, and if we look at a pillbox counter, we can get that there. So you've got a -3 defense value, which is very good, and a +2 troop quality, which is very significant as well, because most of the units on board here are the Navy. There are only a few Army units at the start. These would be 2 artillery units here, which are fairly small, 2-factor artillery units, and an HQ and a leader here. That's it. Everything else is Navy. And the troop quality for the Navy is only 3. So these pillboxes are really very welcome in that respect. Now, within these bunkers are these anti-tank guns, which they're only 3 factors and 8 range, but 8 range is enough. And the 3-factor, the significant part is that it's a white border, and that means that it's switchable between armor piercing and high explosive. And let's face it, high explosive is going to be the thing here. And these have the range with 8 here, here, and here. I believe this is a 3 and this is a 4. We've added leaders in, so they add to the fire value, so they're all at 4s, and they have the range to get to these boxes. Essentially, you can count up to the beach, and then 1 box to get to here, 3 boxes to get to any other, and pretty much with each of them, you can at least get to this box, if not these. And particularly this reef zone, which has the bonus defense value is not as good as the others. If you look, sorry, I'm off the camera here. If we look at these zones, they have a shield value here of -2. That's actually a misprint. That should be a 0. So the defense value is much worse at the reef zone than anywhere else. So the transition from here to here is where fire will happen, and the opportunity fire will come from these 3 anti-tank guns here. So they're fairly significant and something the Americans have to do about. Beyond that, the infantry on the board is fairly weedy. We have a line here of 1 factor naval infantry units. Now, one rule about this scenario is that the Navy units can't voluntarily go into column, so which effectively means they can't move. The only instance they can is if they're in a fire hex and they have to get out of there. So they're not actually going to move. This red dotted line is very significant for this scenario, and this is known as the D1 line. And this is where the Americans planned to occupy on day 1. And the scenario special rule says that the Americans can't go beyond 1 hex outside that line. As you see, these guys are stationed just beyond the line. The other significant part is that the Japanese get victory points for killing Americans, but they also get victory points for units within that line at the end of the scenario, which is on the second night turn of the 24th. So you get a whole day as the game, and you get points for people inside there. Now, of course, these guys aren't inside there and they can't move. However, the reason why is that they're restricted on their placement. There was I believe it's here. These units have to be within 2, and these 2 units have to be within 2 of there. We've managed to sneak 1 guy in there, which I think is very significant. So we've put that with the pillbox. Oh, sorry, it's that unit there. That's from the variable setup. Everything else is fixed. So we do have some presence here, and of course we have this pillbox here. We're going to have to rely on the army reinforcements, which will come on in these 2 hexes here, A and B, to actually try and get into that zone and score points. Note here we've got some caves. We have a steep slope, we have a little slope here, and up here at this point here we have our observation point, so we can see Americans coming. This means that the sugar cane and the brush doesn't matter. Also, as far as LOS goes for the anti-tank guns, the brush and the cane here is transparent as well, so they can fire all the way through here to get to the beach. Just looking at the rest of the map, we haven't set anything up because we're playing this first scenario, and I said we're going to try and fudge it if necessary, if we want to get to the rest of the campaign. But you see, it's not the biggest island anyway, and it's a nicely compact single map game here. So yeah, there is a sequence to the start. There's kind of a little special mini action phase which is fairly fixed at the start of the game, and we will run through, and then we'll look to start picking chits as well. So there's no prep at the start, there's no preparatory phase, there's no dispatch point. The markers are fixed, and then we go through the sequence, and then we're into the action phase to pick chits up until the end of the first turn. And the first turn isn't amazingly excited. As you can see, the Americans are back up here, so I need 2 turns to actually get to the beach, which will happen, of course, but they're not going to get any further, really. So, and in fact, they aren't going to get any further because there's only one amphibious movement chit, and you move from there to there, and you don't end up actually on the beach for the turn. So turn 2 is much more interesting than turn 1, but you will get some opportunity fire onto the reef zone. As it is, nothing's going to be moving pretty much on the board for the Japanese. It's just going to be some firing. And significantly, there's a mass bombardment which happens, which will effectively paralyse the Japanese for the turn anyway. Right, the chits for the cups has been determined in the scenario. We have all the standard ones, but without the amphibious movement, air support, and navy support. The navy support is going to be done by the bombardment, and the air support will be done as part of the initial part of the action phase. The amphibious movement will happen again at the start, and then that chit, not the others, will be put into the cup. We also have the Imperial Japanese Army activation, so that's the orange yellow pieces, and we have an activation for the Imperial Navy, the 56th NGF, which is the red units on the board, and we've got a 4th Division activation as well. So that's our lot there, and so we need to start off with actually airstrikes. So we get the full complement of airstrikes. That's these guys here, which you don't need direct commands for. Normally it's a +1 DC to use them, and normally you roll to see how many you get, but we get all 3 at the start of the game. Now these are white bordered units, so they can self-spot, and they can be either high explosive or armor piercing. There's not really a lot of point in being armor piercing for the Americans. For most of it there is a tank, Japanese tank company, but other than that it's all going to be high explosive. Now the point is, now where do we put these? Now the obvious 3 targets, if we look through, are going to be these 3 guys here, which are the anti-tank guns, which can be able to fire on the beach. I think what I might do is I might switch the foxholes to the bottom of the stacks, so we actually get to see the units. Otherwise it's just a bunch of fortification counters. So let me just do that. Right, so that's better. As we were, it's this hex here with anti-tank gun, the one here under this leader, and that one as well. So they're the ones that can fire on the beach. Nothing else is going to be able to do that, with the exception of this guy, the indirect fire artillery. But indirect fire doesn't actually fire on opportunity fire. So as we're moving onto the beach, that won't actually affect things, as of course is these other artillery units around up here, the big guys. So yeah, we'll concentrate on those, and so we will place our aircraft on them. We don't have to roll for aerial spotting because hey, they're in the air anyway and they're already spotting their targets. So just running through these shots. So it's a 6 as an attack factor, and then it's reduced 1 for the sugarcane, 3 for the pillbox, so that's 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and +1 for the defensive value of the artillery unit. So it's a 3 roll, and we were looking for 3 or less, but we want as close to 3 as possible, or maybe a 0 might be very useful. So let's roll that dice. And we get a 3. Brilliant. That's kind of the best result we could get. So as you can see on the chart here, and we are talking about high explosive, which is the yellow. Remember, the white can be either yellow or blue, and of course we want the yellow here for the pillbox. And we're on a 3. If we'd rolled a 4, then it would not work. It would be a miss, but this is the best result, as you can see here, or just about. So it's 2DG/R. So 2DG is 2 disorganized, 2 levels of disorganization. And we'll get a little marker to put on there. Here we go. And we also need to do a route check. That's what the R means. So we're looking at the quality of the unit itself. Now, as it's one of these 56 NGF, it's a Navy unit, and the Navy has a troop quality of 3. And then we need to roll against it. And what we need to do is to get equal to or under that number. Now we have various modifiers to that. So, for example, the disorganized marker gives you a -1 quality. The leader gives us a +2 up here, and we also have the bunker itself, which also gives us 2 levels as well. So we're +4 and -1 for this organisation, so we're +3. So the effective troop quality of the unit in the bunker is actually a 6. 3 + 3, 6. So we're looking to roll 6 or under, and we rolled a 2, so there's no problem there. If we'd failed, it would have got a pinned marker because it's a deployed unit. It's on its front side. It would have routed if it was on the column side, but of course, I say these Japanese units, certainly the naval ones, can't really voluntarily get on their column side in this scenario. I've just inadvertently turned that over. So that's our shot with that air unit. We'll do the top left one here. So we are again on 6, 5 for the sugarcane, 4, 3, 2 for the pillbox, and 3 goes back up 1 for the artillery unit defense value. So again, likewise, a roll of 3. Wow, look at that. Okay, this is a very, very good start. So we have another disorganized to 2 levels, and we also have to take a route check, and I believe we'll pretty much still be on, yeah, we're pretty much at the same level here. So we roll against 6 and we get a 0, which is fine. So we've disorganized these 2 guns, but haven't stopped them firing for the turn. And finally we have over here, I think we're on the same again. Yes, we're on a 3 on the combat, and we rolled a 7, which means that's a miss. And off the planes fly, and that's them done for the turn. We don't put the air support chip into the cup until next turn. Right, next in the sequence, the starting sequence, is the bombardment. So this is very straightforward. We don't actually use the task force counters here. We used, I think I mentioned it before, these bombardment counters here, all 12 of them, and we basically put them on 12 hexes, which we'd like to bombard, and then each one, if I show you what they are, each of them have a firepower of 3, and they don't have any modifiers. So forget about what the state the unit is in. It's just 3 firepower, just everywhere. So I'm going to I'm going to place these bombardment counters, and then we'll look at resolving them all. Right, so that's complete. Now these bombardment counters, when we resolve them, we don't actually remove them. They're actually a barrage counter in their own right, and they're special and they last the entire turn. The wind chit, when it's pulled, doesn't have any effect on them. And if you have a bombardment counter on, as if I zoom in, there's a no movement allowed, which is one thing. Also, vision is reduced to 1 hex, so you can only see 1 hex from that unit that's in there. So it pretty much gums up the Japanese for the first turn, really having these bombardment markers. But I think there's a lot of rolls to do here, so I'm just going to go through them off camera and then come back and we'll see what the results are. Right, we've completed that. Lots of misses, of course, because it was only a 3. However, we got a hit here, which was 2 DG, 2 levels, and there was a route check, but it was fine. Here on these anti-tank guns, we did get quite a good hit here. We got a 0, so we added a DG. It's now at level 3, and also a suppressed marker, which of course means that until that's removed, it can't fire. So that was useful. We did exactly the same thing here. We got a 0, so more useful suppression here. Here we got a slight hit here, just for one disorganization level, no route check. And finally here we got a hit, which was for 2 DGs, and also the route check was failed on a 6. So yeah, a pinned marker is on that, which has severely affected its capabilities until that's removed. So we've done all our bombardment, and onto our next phase of the start, which is the American artillery on Saipan can now fire. So if I zoom out, this is these 3 units here. Let's just get rid of the glare. These 3 units here, which are actually on Saipan. There is actually a spot on the map for them, off on the far right end of the map, but it's going to get knocked and it's far away. And I thought, well, I'll just put them on the display here and use them. So there's 3 artillery units, which of course will need aerial spotting or unit spotting for them. We don't have any units on the island yet, so these will have to be aerial spotting only. So let's see where we need to put them. I suspect the best places would be on these big artillery units. Maybe up here. The other place which might be interesting is there, because these will leave barrage markers, and putting an extra barrage marker on here might be nice. Although what we don't want them to do is to, well, if they did put a barrage marker on that beach, then actually that's not necessarily a bad thing. But yeah, maybe not. I think possibly maybe those 2 artillery units and this big artillery unit, their range is a couple of them are small, 24 range, and it takes 12 range to get to just off the island up here. So it's 12 to there. So yeah, if we do these 2, that would be okay for the 24 range units. That's a 5 and a 4. I think we'll put the 5 on the slightly healthier unit than this one. We'll put the 4, And then the 6 firepower factor one here, it's quite a guy, is a 51 range, so effectively he can go anywhere on the map. And we'll bring him down to this guy, I think, here. Yeah, but these are aerial observations, so therefore we have to roll to see if the actual hit scatters. I'm taking the actual diagram here, and I'm orienting it up the island, so then to the north of the island. So 4 is kind of this way on the island, and to see where the scatter goes. If it does, 0 to 3 means it lands in the right place. So let's start in the top left corner and see if we've got some accuracy. So 0 to 3 we're looking for, and we got a 7. A 7 would end us up being actually moving south, so it would end up here. This one here is a 3, so that truly lands. And down here, oh, I think I've just pushed that a little bit. It's there, I think. For that one, again with a 3, we get a 7, so again it moves to the south. Now, if it hits something, all well and good. If it doesn't, it just leaves a barrage marker. So these two here will just leave barrage markers. And the barrage marker will be a heavy one, because anything above, I believe, 4 is a heavy barrage. So this is 5 and 6. So we just put them in the hex, and they do act as line of sight blockers. They're not going to be particularly relevant, I think, where they are. However, we do get a hit on this guy. So yeah, long suffering. He's already pinned, and we have 4 factors, but there is quite a bit of cover here. I think we're in the brush. We're in a foxhole, so that's -2. We got a +1 from the actual unit itself, and that's it. So -2, so we're on a -1. So that's a 3 factor artillery fire, much like the bombardment. Oops, sorry, I keep hitting the camera. And so that's on a 3. We get a 7, which is a miss. However, we do get to put that barrage marker on top. But we already have the bombardment marker. There's absolutely no point in doing that. I believe we don't put a barrage marker on it. And so our 3 artillery units can go back. They've fired at this point. Normally they fire by use of direct commands during an activation of one of the divisions. And they can fire again off from Saipan. You can actually even move them on the board, and they are in the reinforcement schedule if in the bigger game, if you want to do that. Okay, so we've done that part of it. How much left have we got? So I think that's all the firing. Now we just do the amphibious movement, and then we put that chit in the cup. So the amphibious movement would be to just shift these guys up 1 box, skirting through the reef zone. Now there's nothing that can fire on this, as everything's pretty much covered with bombardment markers, and these guys only have 1 hex range, so we can safely just push them through, and these guys move forward. And that's almost the initial invasion move. The last thing we do is we add the reinforcements for the turn, and the 0700 turn. And so here they are. They're all American, and they of course end up in the transport zone down here. And we have 3 from the 25th RCT. They are 2 companies and a mortar unit, and the same thing here from the 24th RCT. And that's it. From this point on, we're on to the completely normal game. That special invasion bit is over. We must remember to put that amphibious marker in the cup. So I'll be drawing from this to start each of the activations. Right, so let's pick that first chit out of the cup. And the first chit is the direct command chit for the Japanese. So when the direct command chit is pulled, we do a dice halved, rounded down, and add the command rating of each division and add that to the command. So over here, let me actually I'll just move the camera across.